What's up again, everybody? Not long after the previous Lorcana video that I posted everything that you want to know about Lorcana, some new information was sussed out by wonderful members of the community. One of them that runs Lorcania.com, the website that you're looking at right now. Check this out, by the way. Lorcania.com has a section for all of the spoiled cards up until this point. And I believe it was the people or the guy that runs Lorcania.com that actually zoomed in and CSI enhanced this Mulan and Hades card to find out what they said. And when they did that, we all, in my opinion, discovered how this game is going to be both played and won. So if you're very curious about Lorcana and you want to know what kind of game is this going to be, or is there really going to be like depth in a system, this is the video for you because we're going to talk about that right now. Let's go ahead and take a look at Mulan, Imperial Soldier, who is a 5-cost 4/5 Storyborn hero princess, who says lead by example during your turn. Whenever this character banishes another character in a challenge, your other characters gain +1 diamond, or in this case, pip, this turn. And that right there tells us exactly how this game is going to be both fought out and won, because these pips officially, in my mind, represent our win condition, what you have to collect to win the game. And Hades supports that theory. Hades is an 8-cost 6/7. He is the king of Olympus. He is a flood-born villain king deity. It's just a smorgasbord here of little keywords and tags. He's got the shift ability, which we are just going to skip right on over because we could talk about a whole another 10-minute video on shift. But his effect is Sinister Plot. This character gets +1 pip for every other villain character you have in play. And there you have it. Both of these cards, in my opinion, reveal exactly what you are doing in this game. And so I'm just going to come out and say it. I'm not going to bury the lead anymore. This game is going to play in many ways similarly to Keyforge. It is going to be a race game where you establish characters on the board that have their own pips and can then gain these pips, which I do believe we have a name for, gain them through a variety of means, both players attempting to establish their own board states and gather these pips up first to become the best Illumineer. And this is supported, in my opinion, in an old Dicebreaker article. This Dicebreaker article was posted all the way back in September of last year, and this blurb right here gives us a little bit more info on this. It says, in our game, it's 2 Illumineers trying to show who's the best Illumineer. Cards represent characters that you've put together from your team that you summon from your Illumineer station, and you send them on quests to gain lore. Okay, now this could just be PR talk, and essentially they could be saying that, you know, like sending someone on quests and gaining lore is just like combat or something like that. I don't believe that. I think there's way better ways to say that in PR talk than to put it this way. I truly think that they are spelling out ways for you to gain these pips, and that those ways are going to be very similar in some respects to a race game like Keyforge. So how is this going to work? Well, you are going to be building up your resources over the game and then playing out a variety of your characters from your deck. And as you notice from the cards that have been spoiled, they all, to some degree, have their own pip or multiple pips that they represent. And these pips I am going to just be calling lore from now on, because I believe the goal here is to collect X amount of lore. And I think like 15, for example, seems like a solid number. Maybe 15 is a little high, but it just kind of depends on what cards do. Like, for example, Mulan here, if she battles and then takes something out, then she puts a pip on everybody, and that could be very snowbally very quickly. And so like a number like 15 might be approachable. But 10 was the number that I most likely settled on in general based on the number of pips that are distributed so far on these characters. But essentially, you're going to be playing out your characters who generate their own victory points themselves. And as long as they are on the table, on your side of the field, they represent that many points. So for example, Robin Hood here, most likely going to represent 2 points, in addition to the other things that Robin Hood can do. Elsa represents 1 point. Cruella de Vil represents 1, Stitch represents 3, costs 6, and then Mickey here represents 4 pips, costs 8, very expensive. Maleficent here costs 9, only 2 pips, but removes an entire creature from your opponent's side of the board. Just takes out a character completely. So there's a big swing there. That just like literally removes a Mickey, for example. But essentially, as you're building up your board state, you're gaining closer and closer to this victory condition. Get to, let's just say, 10 lore. Your opponent is also doing the same thing, and that is where combat comes in, just like in Keyforge. Because in Keyforge, you're doing the exact same thing. You're playing out creatures, and you are using those creatures to do something called reaping. And reaping is where you tap the creature, or you exert the creature, so that you can then go and basically have them gather up the victory condition in the lore speak. You gather up the victory point and you add it to your pile. The same thing, I think, is going to be in this game, where your characters can be exerted, which we can actually see what exerting looks like here. It's got this little symbol. You can exert your character to send them on a quest and gain a lore, which perhaps goes onto their card or just goes into sort of like a victory pile on the side. And in this whole process of building up this board state and then sending your characters out to just go and quest, you gain victory points. But what happens if your opponent is ahead of you? Well, you can use your characters on the field to challenge your opponent's characters. And in doing so, in challenging them, you are going to compare your attack stat with their defense stat. And depending on how this stat compares to that stat, you can banish them. Basically defeat them in combat, removing them from the board, thus giving you a creature on the board that you can continually perhaps use to build incremental advantage, whereas your opponent loses that advantage over time. Now, this is where I think they are going to draw in on Keyforge as well, and damage when dealt back and forth to both characters in this game, I believe is going to be persistent. You are going to have 4 damage dealt by Mulan, and let's say she deals that to Cruella, and then Cruella hits her for 1. And so I believe you're going to have to put a damage counter on Mulan and keep track of that damage, because over time you could, basically just remove Mulan via multiple attackers if you have smaller attackers. And of course, talking about combat does make me curious. What is your favorite combat system in any game? Because I've been describing this Keyforge system of combat where you can kind of go in and out, free flow within combat. You're not kind of chained down to a phase. Do you like that, or do you prefer something a little bit more traditional like a Magic the Gathering combat system or phases like that? Let me know in a comment below what your favorite combat system. Last time you told me about your favorite resource system, and so many of you mentioned some fantastic ones and ones that I forgot existed. So I'm really excited to hear what you have for me down there in the comments. And so persistent damage is going to be tracked and maintained on the board state so that you can play this just incredibly tense tug of war back and forth game where are you going to use your characters to go quest and gain you more lore and try to win the game? Or are you going to try to control the board state? Are you going to do some more interesting things with keywords that we've already seen? Perhaps something like this, for example. Robin Hood here has this ability that says, good shot. During your turn, this character gains evasive. They can challenge characters with evasive. So evasive is a keyword that basically protects your character from being challenged, which would be fantastic if you have a character that you want to sit out there and just constantly gain incremental value with to win the game. Which is, again, why I believe they're going to incorporate something that allows you to go out and quest for lore, because evasive is a perfect thing for that. And if your deck is centered around setting up a bunch of evasive creatures or characters in this sense, and you want to just kind of try to win that way, your opponent is going to need something that can deal with that. And so it could be that they use this evasive keyword to deal with your evasive characters. It could also be that your opponent just chooses to play cards like Dragonfire, and they just straight up target your character with Dragonfire. And then maybe you want to protect against that, and so you play Aurora with Protective Embrace that says your other characters gain Ward. Opponents can't choose them except to challenge. And so now all of a sudden, your opponent can't, with Aurora active, your opponent can't just go, okay, well, I'm just going to, do this and that and target them and exert them in this. I have to actually engage in combat to slow you down. So there's a lot of like these little keyword hints that I truly believe are pointing us straight to the idea that we are racing, that our goal is to collect pips, and that the management of your opponent's board compared to your own board is going to be huge in a game like this. And I'll tell you right now, if this game plays out anything like what I just described, it is going to be incredible, because a lot of those mechanics, game mechanics, are found in Keyforge, and this game was incredible, and it still is technically incredible because it is continuing to release sets under a new owner. But if this at all pans out this way, it is going to be an incredibly fun back and forth dynamic experience, and one that people are very much going to just dive into. The other thing you want to think about, if this is the case, a game like Keyforge, which is another kind of open, I want to call it like more of an open game, meaning that you don't have these strict phases, that your turn is not broken up into like a standby phase and then a main phase where you play stuff and then a combat phase, but is instead just your turn. And you can choose to fight first, and then you can choose to send someone on a quest, and then you can fight again with something else, and then you can play another card, and you can do this and that. And in doing so, your turn's wide open to sequence in these very interesting and back and forth ways. And that is also going to make this game incredibly fun, and is probably integral to the gameplay experience if this is going to be a race game. So that is what I think we are getting with Lorcana, and I want to know what you think in a comment below. Tell me what you think. If you think that this is correct, if you think this is how this game is going to play, let me know in a comment below. But if you think something else is going to come about with the way this game plays out, let me know as well, and where you're kind of getting that info from, because I want to know if you have some ideas for yourself. So sound off in a comment below. If you enjoyed this video, if you got something out of it, feel free to make the number go slightly higher, because numbers going up, that's cool, man. And if you're excited for Lorcana, feel free to share this with your friends so that we can all get hyped together. As always, thanks for watching.